A very warm welcome to everyone. Good afternoon, our distinguished panelists, esteemed guests, and valued colleagues. I am Anushka Maheshwari, and I work as a researcher at the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water, and I'll be the MC for today's event. I thank you all for being part of the launch of our comprehensive report on unlocking India's RE and green hydrogen potential, an assessment of land, water, and climate nexus. This report launch is a big stepping stone in the way forward for our collective goal of a clean, sustainable energy future. As we all know that green hydrogen holds immense importance for India, as India is one of the world's largest and fastest growing economies. India's energy demands are very vast and very various. So green hydrogen presents itself as a unique opportunity to cater to these demands. Keeping in mind our energy commitments and economic development. But to scale up green hydrogen in India, there are multifaceted challenges that are there, be it technological development or infrastructure development, from financial investments to policy framework. A lot of hurdles are in the way of scaling up green hydrogen and RE, and our report tries to delve deep into these challenges and give a way forward for actionable items. I would like to thank my fellow authors and contributors to the report to making this a very detailed analysis and a roadmap for future. And I would like to now so let's buckle up for this event and drive our attention to gear up RE and green hydrogen in India. I would like to now call Dhruva Purkastia, Director for Growth and Institutional Advancement, to give a brief context and overview of the study. A very warm welcome, Dhruva. Also, I would request people to come in the front and occupy the front rows, as we'll have some QR questions, so it'll be really helpful. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining in this Unlocking India's RE and Green Hydrogen Potential report from the Council for Energy, Environment and Water. At the start, I'm quite privileged and honored to kind of launch this report. And this is an assessment of nexus between land, water, and climate. You know, this essentially is a report which sort of takes me back practically decades when I used to work at the World Bank, and when all of these issues were to, in some manner, we looked at the problem as a social and environmental safeguard. And today, 15 years later, what we looked at as a safeguard and what we looked at, frankly speaking, as a problem, okay, we have to meet these safeguards. They were just about, in some ways, ticking the box that a project intervention has happened, and it may be a renewable energy project. But all you needed to do is to look at whether the social safeguards, whether rehabilitation, whether land acquisition has happened properly and it's taken care of. Now, this brings me to the nexus, and let me start with saying the Council for Energy, Environment and Water is essentially all about nexus. It's about nexus between energy, environment, water, and not looking at the problem of climate as just as mitigation. Because one of the key issues that we see in climate today is essentially the inability to differentiate between what is climate and what is environment. And therefore, climate does comprise a small part where the environment is way wider. Now, as I get to this Nexus report, it will be very interesting to note a few points on this Nexus as we look at India's growth trajectory, This is essentially a nexus or a balance. What this report brings out, it's a balance between development and growth aspirations and inclusion and keeping society intact. Now, if we look at how renewable energy, hydrogen is getting planned, green hydrogen, supplied by renewable energy, of course. But as we look at it, appears to be very simple on the horizon to say 500 gigawatt and 35 MMPT of hydrogen by 2030. But as we look at what our policy prescription is of a net zero by 2070, we begin to realize that the requirements are of the order of magnitude which is very, very different. The order of magnitude gets into 7,000, 8,000 gigawatts of renewable energy. It gets into 30 to 50 MMPTA of green hydrogen. And as we look at how this will come about, at the end of the day, this will impinge on three things. This will impinge. We cannot change the geography, nor can we change the population. So therefore, we are captive to the geography that we have and the population that we have in terms of whatever growth and fertility rates that be, and therefore the demands on land from different uses are going to increase. If you read this report and on the scenarios casted, you will see that how we have classified each of these constraints in terms of land use, in terms of physical risks of climate, in terms of getting into earthquake-prone zones, in terms of getting at population densities, and then talking about the potential of social conflicts. Where do social conflicts arise? They arise from the very fact that I have been estranged from my land, from my livelihoods. And as you read this, you will see there is already social conflicts showing up. So it's not only social conflicts, there are conflicts with biodiversity, there are conflicts with other aspects of flora and fauna getting into it. Therefore, there is an increasing need to recognize the balance that we, as we pursue this unmitigated, I would say unmitigated trajectory of going green, is also needs to get balanced. And as we move to hydrogen, I want to draw attention to water. Now, when you look at water, what we understand water as uncommitted water, there is not water allocated for energy usage. There is no water allocated which is defined for. India is one of the largest, amongst the large countries, one of the most heavily water-stressed countries in the world, at least from a freshwater point of view. Now, there is an aspect of land, there is an aspect of land costs, there is an aspect of, and let's also recognize water, we have not addressed water from a point of view as an economic good. And as you use up water to produce hydrogen, there is a need to increasingly factor in those costs. And therefore, as we look at levelized costs of energy, we also look at levelized costs of hydrogen over a period of time. But as this report will present to you some scenarios and some situations of what can be done in terms of looking at how do we acquire land, acquire or rather buy land from the state, how do you develop graded land parks so that those conflicts are minimized, how do you possibly think of rehabilitation of people and creating livelihoods so that the potential of social conflicts is minimized. At the same time, pursue the quest towards green, I would say green economic growth. But it may be important at some point of time to also look at and factor in the social costs of going green. And that is a next step that needs to be done from this report. If we can attribute an economic price or a number to a social cost, which we have not done, which the society does not do, which the governments do not do at the present moment. And therefore, this report serves as an eye-opener to think that these are the constraints on the trajectory that we have taken. It is important, and it would remain important, that we recognize them and we take them into consideration as we then move ahead beyond 2030 towards a net zero or a green economic growth future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dhruba, for setting the brief context and overview of the study. The aspect of Nexus was explained very well. Now, for a detailed presentation, I would like to call Deepak Yadav and Nitin Bassi, both senior program leads at CEEW, to give a detailed presentation on unlocking India's RE and green hydrogen potential and assessment of land, water, and climate nexus. So in importance of time, we will not be doing the Q&A session after the presentation. If you have any questions, you can mail to the authors or CEEW team later, and we can also talk bilaterally in the refreshments time period. Thank you.
Thank you, Anushka. Good afternoon, and I welcome you all to the presentation on unlocking India's renewable energy and green hydrogen potential. A quick introduction. So we at the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, we are a not-for-profit policy research institution based out of New Delhi. We use data, integrated analysis, and strategic outreach to explain and change the use, reuse, and misuse of resources. As you can see on the slide, there are 3 pillars that we work in. The first is transformation, transformation because we cannot move ahead without addressing legacy issues. And in this regard, we are working on aspects like how can India achieve net zero emissions in the long term? How can we sort of transform the power markets? How can we achieve sustainability in our industrial practices? How can we achieve sustainable livelihoods? So these are broader areas that we work under transformation. The second pillar that we work on is basically the quality of life, right? So any research, any public policy institution will work on, trying to increase or improve the quality of life. And in this regard, we are working on solving very difficult problems, like how do we sort of, improve the air quality in Delhi NCR area, for example. How can we provide, clean water, clean air, sustainable mobility, for applications for our citizens. And to achieve the first 2 pillars, we have something called as enablers. And so sustainable finance is important for all levers. And there are other important levers like technology futures, etc., that we also work in. We also have 4 dedicated specialized initiatives. These initiatives are CEEW Center for Energy Finance that focuses just on financial aspects related to transition. And then there are other initiatives as well. So in this particular research, we have 3 broader objectives. The first objective is to sort of estimate what is the total renewable energy. And when I say renewable energy, I imply varying renewable energy, which is solar, onshore and offshore wind. What is the total varying renewable energy potential in India? And correspondingly, what is the green hydrogen production potential in India? So that is the first research question that we are trying to answer. The second research question is linked to the first question. Basically, if you look at the entire map of India, how does the cost of green hydrogen production, how does the cost of solar power production, how does the cost of wind power production essentially vary, considering factors like land cost, which is very critical in case of solar, considering factors like the availability or the plant load factors of wind energy as well. So that is the second research objective. The third research objective is to look at everything combined. And this is where we talk about something like green hydrogen, renewable energy, land, water, climate nexus, right? So in terms of presentation, I will be covering the first 2 parts of the research objective. My colleague Nitin will be talking in detail on the nexus related aspects. So in terms of research methodology, what we have done is, as you can see on the left-hand side, we have divided the entire country into a raster of 5 kilometers by 5 kilometers. We have also done a sensitivity study where we have divided entire country into 100 meters by 100 meters raster. So 100 meters by 100 meters is a very small size raster. But then, we found that doing a 5 kilometer by 5 kilometer and a 100 meters by 100 meters assessment, the top level numbers do not change. Therefore, for ease of, data assessment, data analysis, etc., we have stuck with a 5 kilometer by 5 kilometer matrix. And within each raster, we have considered two parameters for evaluating the renewable energy and green hydrogen potential. First set is exclusion parameters, which basically considers aspects like land use, land cover. So for example, we cannot set up utility scale solar power plants in Delhi NCR area because land is not available, right? And land being very costly is a constraint, right? So we cannot set up, renewable energy projects. For example, in heavily forested area, it doesn't make sense to chop down forest just to set up, renewable energy plants, right? So those are exclusion parameters that we have considered. Again, we cannot set up, renewable energy projects in military strategic zones, in no-go zones, etc. So we start with the entire landmass of India, and then there are a set of exclusion parameters that we have considered to remove the corresponding renewable energy potential, and what we are left with is a net renewable energy potential in India, right? So those are exclusion parameters. What we also consider are something called as constraints. Now these constraints could be, let's say, if you want to set up a green hydrogen project somewhere in western Rajasthan, the challenge is water availability, right? Water availability is a constraint. If you want to set up, let's say green hydrogen project on the eastern coast of India, climate risk is a constraint, right? So these will not sort of stop you from setting up, renewable energy projects, not stop you from setting up green hydrogen projects, but they will present you with certain constraints that also needs to be factored in, right? So considering with exclusion parameters, we get renewable energy and green hydrogen potential, and considering constraints, we get the nexus. So we'll start first with the solar energy potential in India. So for estimating, if we consider that the entire landmass in India is covered with solar panels, right? We are looking at around 145,000 gigawatts of solar energy potential, which is not needed to achieve our climate goals. Right? But what we did is, there are certain exclusion parameters that have been considered. For example, we cannot have solar power plants in no-go zones, etc., which I just talked about, right? So if you remove all the exclusion parameters, including cropland, right? Because there is 66,000 gigawatts of solar power potential in croplands, but not all of it can be realized, maybe except, horticulture or agrovoltaics, where, something like solar photovoltaics makes sense. So if we remove all exclusion parameters that I discussed earlier, what we are left with is a net solar energy potential in India, which is around 25,000 gigawatts. We need around 7,000 gigawatts to achieve net zero emissions by 2070, so abundant solar energy potential is available. A key factor when discussing about solar potential is the fact that the solar PLF is not the same. So you will get better PLF of solar power in Rajasthan, not so better PLF in, let's say, in Odisha or Kerala, for example, right? And therefore, we have also categorized the solar power availability based on the PLF which is available. For example, there is 6,000 gigawatts of solar power available at a PLF of around 25 to 30%, right? But the top level numbers are India has a solar power potential of around 25,000 gigawatts and about 20,000 gigawatts if we consider areas which have a PLF exceeding 23%. And when we say the solar PLF, the solar potential is 20,000 gigawatt plus, what we very often forget is the seasonality part. So in terms of wind energy, we very often say that the wind is very seasonal in nature. But when we talk about solar, we just focus on the diurnal aspects, right? But what we show here on the slide here is areas that have significant seasonality factor. For example, if you look at the entire central belt here, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, etc., significant solar power potential, but again, significant seasonality as well. That is not the case in case of Rajasthan, which is indicated in blue here. There is the seasonality aspect related is very less. What the seasonality actually implies is that about 17,000 gigawatts out of 25,000 gigawatt potential exhibits significant seasonality when it comes to solar power availability. A few states, for example, our assessment indicates that Madhya Pradesh has a solar potential of around 3,000 gigawatt, but 50% of that potential exhibits, significant seasonality. Odisha, for example, 1300 gigawatts of, solar power potential, but again, significant seasonality, has 99% of the total solar potential in Odisha, experiences significant seasonality. So that is a challenge when it comes to solar power. And what will be the consequence of seasonality? We will need not only energy storage for diurnal variation, we will also need energy storage to take care of seasonal variations as well. Moving on to onshore wind energy potential, I will not spend a lot of time talking about the methodology because the methodology is the same, with an exception that we consider that wind power plants can be set up in croplands as well, which is factually correct because the actual footprint, land footprint area of wind power plants is significantly lower. Our estimate is that the total wind power potential in India is around 1800 gigawatts, which is what NIWE is also saying. And as you can see on the slide deck here on the right-hand side, the most of the wind energy potential in India is located in the western and the southern part of India. And here we have also sort of split. So we have considered, when we say the wind energy potential is around 1800 gigawatts, we only consider, sites which have a PLF exceeding 30%. If you look at, sites which have a PLF of 25 to 30%, not commercially viable as of now, then you can add additional 2000 gigawatts to that number, right? So that is what the key message is from this slide. Moving to offshore wind energy potential, again, our research indicates that, So our research indicates that the unconstrained offshore wind potential in India is around 7,000 gigawatt. But as you can see here, bulk of the potential, which is around 4,500 gigawatt, is lost in no-go zones. So there are certain no-go zones where wind energy potential is available. So that potential is lost. But even after that, we are left with around 2,500 gigawatts of offshore wind potential. And as you can see on the map of the right, bulk of the offshore wind potential is in the states of, in the coast of states of Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, and also significant presence is there in the east coast as well. Now, a key factor when we talk about offshore wind potential is the depth at which the corresponding potential is available, right? So, our research indicates that about 30% of the total offshore wind potential, which is around 737 gigawatts, is available at depths lower than 500 meters, which means these potential exists near the coast, and in future, whenever it achieves, cost competitiveness, we can set up power evacuation infrastructure. What do we do about the remaining 70%, right? So potential solution could be the offshore wind potential can be used for producing green ammonia at the site, and then it can cater to the exports market. And as it achieves cost competitiveness, we can also produce offshore, green ammonia and consume it in India as well. That is one potential application of, harnessing offshore wind potential, which is available, further away from the coast. Wind-solar hybrid potential, wind-solar hybrid is very important from two reasons. First is, we need wind-solar hybrid for round-the-clock energy, or nowadays it is called as firm and dispatchable renewable energy. Wind-solar hybrid is also needed for production of green hydrogen. So typically, when we say for green hydrogen production or for FDRE applications, about 60 to 70% of the total power should come from wind energy, right? So that is why wind-solar hybrid is important. We do a similar, follow a similar methodology for estimating the wind-solar hybrid potential, and we find that India has a wind-solar hybrid potential in areas where wind PLF exceeds 30% to be around 3,700 gigawatt. It's a big number, but here's the challenge. 84% of that wind-solar hybrid potential is just solar power. So we have, 16% of energy which can come from wind, but 84% of that is solar power, which means we will face significant challenges for either for FDRE applications or for green hydrogen production as well. But there are some bright spots as well. For example, if you look at Gujarat, the total wind-solar hybrid potential is around 870 gigawatts, out of which 45% is wind. So that's good. If you look at Karnataka, again, 500 gigawatts potential for wind-solar hybrid, out of which around 43-45% is again wind power. So there are a few bright spots, but the challenge with wind-solar hybrid is too much of solar potential and very limited wind potential. A key challenge with wind-solar hybrid will be, what do we use wind-solar hybrid for? Do we use it for something like firm and dispatchable renewable energy, or do we use it for green hydrogen production? How do we actually prioritize, the whatever limited wind solar hybrid potential is available in India, right? So that is the key part that needs to be deliberated upon. I'll move to the next part. So this is the second research question that we are working on, which is basically how does your renewable energy potential translates into cost? And there are two factors that influence the cost of power or the cost of hydrogen. First is the cost of land, where you are setting up solar energy projects. And second is the PLF, the renewable energy availability, right? Considering considering these factors, here, this graph here shows the levelized cost of electricity against the cumulative solar potential across a few select states in India. As it is evident from the plot itself, and which can also be seen on the image on the right, that Rajasthan leads the pack. So Rajasthan has a solar potential of exceeding 6,000 gigawatts, and it has also the lowest cost of producing renewable energy, solar power. A very interesting insight from our assessment is that Gujarat and Odisha, they have ballpark similar solar energy potential, around 1,300 gigawatts, which can be seen here in the graph as well. But the key differentiating factor is that the cost of production, the cost of solar power production in Odisha is significantly higher as compared to Gujarat, primarily because of two reasons: high land prices in Odisha and lower solar PLF. But in terms of potential, Odisha and Gujarat are neck to neck. And then we have also indicated the other states in India and the corresponding cost of production as well. This is a similar plot, LCOE of wind power on the y-axis, the cumulative wind potential on the x-axis. And you can see here there are three states that have significant wind power potential and also lower cost. These states are Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Gujarat. Karnataka, for example, here the red line, it has significant wind potential and also has the lowest cost of production. Maharashtra and Gujarat are sort of neck to neck. And the corresponding LCOEs are also indicated here on the map on the right. This is the final part of my presentation, which is, how does the green hydrogen production cost vary across the country, across all states, and what is the corresponding production potential? So here, what we indicate is the levelized cost of hydrogen. So, when we talk about green hydrogen production, it is well-known fact by now that green hydrogen can be produced at the lowest cost only in areas that have wind solar hybrid. Therefore, we consider that, for achieving our green hydrogen target, etc., all our green hydrogen will be produced only in wind solar hybrid. In the base case, we also have sensitivities for solar as well, but with solar, the cost of production is significantly higher. If we consider the entire wind solar hybrid potential in India, we can produce about 80 million ton of green hydrogen, which far exceeds our green hydrogen requirement. I think Dhruva mentioned about 30 to 50 million ton of green hydrogen is what we need to achieve net zero emissions, right? Even considering that, out of 80 million ton, and we very often say that water is a very big factor. Yes, water availability is not a big factor, water management is, because about 56 MTPA of hydrogen out of 80 million ton can be produced without any water availability related challenges. Yes, water management will be an issue which Nitin will talk about in the Nexus slides that he'll be presenting subsequently. But 56 million ton without any water availability issues is a big number. In fact, if you see on the map on the right, entire landmass of India, with the exception of Rajasthan and a few isolated places, etc., water is available in sufficient quantity as of now, based on our consumption as of today, to meet our green hydrogen production requirements. How does the cost of producing green hydrogen vary across various states, right? So this graph here, it shows a plot of levelized cost of hydrogen on y-axis and the green hydrogen output using wind solar hybrid on x-axis, right? Leading the pack are Gujarat and Rajasthan. So these states have significant potential to produce green hydrogen. However, the key differentiating factor being in Gujarat, which is this curve, you can produce green hydrogen at a significantly lower cost compared to the cost that you will incur when you are producing green hydrogen in Rajasthan. The key reason being, in Gujarat, the wind PLFs are significantly better than what Rajasthan has to offer. Then, if you look at other states, for example, Odisha, some amount of wind potential, limited amount of wind solar hybrid potential. Consequently, the cost of production increases significantly beyond a certain particular threshold, right? So this is all about green hydrogen, renewable energy. I will now invite my colleague Nitin Bassi to talk more about the green hydrogen, renewable energy, land-water nexus. Over to you, Nitin.
Thank you so much, Deepak, for covering all the technical aspects of the study and also how the estimation have been made. So it makes my life easy of explaining the nexus. Probably this is what I think. Is this the right slide? Yeah. So, one second. Now, what we have seen, till up to this mark is that, potential exists to scale up RE. Of course, as Deepak mentioned, 80% of it will be also subjected to the seasonality, that we may encounter in different parts of our country. But we have been living with it, so I'm sure there are ways of also handling the seasonality aspect as well. The other, important constraints, if we look from the point of view of, the natural resource base, the physicality of it, in terms of socio-economic aspects that are there in our country. So we have considered, various such limiting factors, which can impact the realization of this potential, and that is where the nexus, the whole nexus approach comes into picture. If you look at this particular graph, and one thing that I would like to specify is that this is based on the assumption that and again, this is coming from our modeling, various modeling studies that we have undertaken, that to achieve net zero, we at least need to have about 7,000 gigawatt of RE deployed, across India. And if we look at, how this deployment can happen, and as I said, again, looking at from the point of view of, let's say, the climate risk, that the country faces. So here the considerations are mainly the water-related extremes like droughts, floods that can happen from time to time, and also the heat stress that we face during different in different regions during different time period. Population density is again considered as one of the important factors because that will definitely define how accessible the land can be, and what is the impact that can have if we are looking at RE deployment, and especially considering water as a lens there. Then of course there is a land price that plays an important role, because of course for a lot of this deployment we need to actually get land, and that too at a price that it should not affect the overall sustainability of the RE project itself. And then, there are other things. Seismicity is one of the important factors that we have considered. Now, if we look at all these factors and look at the incremental, kind of a realization of RE, what we see is that as we, move towards getting that 7,000 gigawatt that we intend to realize by 2070, there is an increase in risk. So there is an increase in water that is available in per capita. I mean, there is an increase in the risk to water availability. The land prices also goes up. The seismicity increases, and the population density also increases. So which means that a lot of factors come into picture, and there is a lot of trade-off that we have to handle if we really have to achieve the 7,000 gigawatt that we tend to employ. And this is what the Nexus is all about. One thing that is can be easily explained here is that even in terms of the risk, though it is not same all around, but then it will have impact maybe where we have the highest RE potential. For example, if we look at Rajasthan, we look at Gujarat, we look at a lot of central India. I mean, Deepak showed one map which shows how the seasonality plays a role. But even the variability, the variability that we experience in such settings will make it a bit difficult, for realization. And this is where, we need to find solutions at the technical scale. The similar sort of, kind of a constraints we find when we see the green hydrogen production. And of course, here the assumption is that we'll be going, I think, around 50 MTPA and metric tons per annum. The idea is that 5 to 10 will be for the domestic consumption, and rest of it can be exported. Here, again, the challenges, as we have listed down, climate risk, uncommitted water, population, land-related aspects, and the land price. Now, it's clear that, if we have to reach the scale, these are the challenges that we need to take care of. These are the challenges that we should address. Otherwise, realization of such a potential can be constrained. Having said that, even if we look at, what is achievable, without going into much of the risk or, kind of a constraint that these factors can put. I think around, 15 or let's say 15 to 50, it's 15, around 15 MTPA is still possible, without having a lot of constraint. But as we move on, of course, the risk increases, the variability in the factors increases, and, we will be challenged by various factors. Now, all this analysis, whether, about the potential or about the nexus that we have undertaken, it is undertaken, as Deepak explained, by considering a grid of, 5 kilometer by 5 kilometer, and then we have, collated data at the national level, and then some of the data sets that we collated, they were also apportioned to the district scale, and that is how, we were able to prepare these maps. Now, what we need to do, that such assessments also need to take into consideration some of the data that can be obtained directly from the field, and also ground truthing some of the findings that we have obtained. For this, one of the things is that uncertainty in land prices. Of course, we have done our best to get hold of what are the land prices, but as you know, there is a difference between the circle rate and what exactly the land is sold, at a price which land is sold. So this uncertainty will remain, and as we move on, this is something we would also like to address whenever we kind of zero on the findings to a particular state or a region. Hyper-local issue related to land ownership are difficult to capture. Yes, again, who's owning the land. In many states, it is difficult to actually find an inventory. Though government has started a lot of programs, for example, a lot of the hill states, now they have a very good land inventory, and it provides a clear, kind of a picture in terms of who owns the land, how much is the land. But then, in other areas, there is a lot of fragmentation that happens. And within a family, of course, if the land is getting fragmented into 2 or 3 parcels, that also complicates the situation when it comes to, procurement of land for RE deployment. So this is also something that needs to be addressed, that, to have a good inventory, which can then form the basis of land procurement. Land rent is again, something which, kind of was emerged as a limitation, because, again, if somebody is having a rented land holding, that land won't be available, with him. And then you have to again look for, the owner, or then again the cost has to be worked out accordingly. Now, one of the aspect, I think, is again of the green hydrogen availability of less than 85% on annual basis. Again, a lot of variation in the seasonality that we have discussed. So that can, of course, impact the production level, because if 80% of the solar potential or the deployment that is possible, if it is subjected to a lot of seasonality, then of course, and I think as per our analysis, that seasonality is there for 3 months. But then those 3 months can be very crucial when it comes to the production level or the production that we would like to intend. So this is again something which we have to take care of as we move forward. Now, we also are offering some solutions, but of course these are based on a very kind of a national and the pan-India assessment that we have undertaken. And believe me, there were a lot of stakeholder consultations that we organized to validate the numbers that we are getting, to validate our findings. What we recommend is, first is to validation of RE and green hydrogen potential using high quality data and on-ground assessment. So I told that, there is a need to maybe work in specific states which have a high such potential, try to talk to the stakeholders, and also obtain field data and do ground truthing of what we have also, found. So this will, this will be a kind of a one major recommendation going forward. The second is to have a land bank. Now, some states, they encourage setting up of RE, kind of projects. For example, Gujarat, Rajasthan, they are the state, which are at the forefront. But then the similar kind of a policy or similar kind of a land availability might not be there in other states. And the bigger reason is that, Western India, Northwestern India, the land availability per capita is higher than in other parts of the country. So, creating land banks in such regions, can still be easier because you have a lot of land. And, some of the land cannot be put under production. For example, in Rajasthan, there is a huge land per capita, but a lot of it can't be put under production. So their creation of such land banks can be, easier. But then in other states where the per capita land holding is lesser, so there, maybe the states can also look for, options, how they can create such parcels, how they can create these incentives, which can encourage a lot of developers to move to those states where the potential is also high. Evaluate the grid infra where there is promising RE. Now, this is again a very important factor. So we might have to also look at the sustainability of the grid. So for example, if we deploy more RE, will the grid be able to take care of the evacuation that will happen? Now, one of the things that has been happening in this space is that we have this pump storage projects. And those pump storage projects are kind of a battery to, handle the higher evacuation that might happen to grid because of the higher RE deployment. And, they can, give energy to the grid when it is generated. And when the grid is having higher energy, the same can be utilized by by this water cycle, by the pump storages to pump the water back to the reservoirs. So this is how, they play as a natural battery. But as we said, this needs to be evaluated as well. One aspect of the offshore thing, I mean, we saw that offshore, kind of provides a good kind of option for the green hydrogen production. But then there might be challenges in how you evacuate that off-grid, generation to the landmass or onshore. Now, one is that, you kind of use that for producing ammonia, and then the same can be transported directly from such facilities. But again, this is something which needs to be explored further, that how feasible this can be, and whether it matches with the export route that we have, whether such deployments can be there on the export route. And then, of course, this option can become a one that can be, we can realize. Social impact, of course, as we speak here, I mean, some of our colleagues are in a discussion with Niti Aayog where a working group is formed which is looking at the social aspect of energy transition. And one of the things that we are contributing there is on the water and land requirement aspect. So, and this is going to be challenging. And why social, aspects, let's say, become very important is, as we continue to grow, lot of the resource demand, or for example, if I take example of water, so a lot of water demand is going to come from the domestic water space and from the industrial space. And this is where, we have to balance out that how we balance this demand. And agriculture, of course, it will continue to be the main consumer of water. But then other sectors will also grow, and the growth of water demand in those sectors will be higher than what we are having in the irrigation at present. The last point, so we were doing this, analysis looking at the policy landscape, how the water policy also influence the energy production. And we analyzed existing policies in different states. We also looked at the national policy. Last revision happened in 2012. There is a draft which is ready, it was ready in 2020, but it is still to be out. What we see is that there is no energy specific allocation. You will find let's say at maximum you will find allocation for hydropower generation. There will be allocation for industries. There will be allocation for irrigation. There will be allocation for domestic water. But there won't be any allocation for specific for energy. And as we have seen, a lot of these RE, technologies, they have water footprint. They need water for their functioning. Green hydrogen is a classic case. You can't produce hydrogen without using water. So, but a lot of our policies are still kind of silent on this, and this is where we have to be very careful. The last 2 points, in fact, that I would make is that Deepak mentioned about the need for water management. Now, what does that mean? In many areas, groundwater is overexploited, which means that we are withdrawing more than what is being recharged in those areas. Now, when we are making allocation, we have to ensure, even in the non-overexploited zones, that it should not cross the safe field. So, as per the Central Groundwater Board criteria, if we can keep groundwater withdrawal to 70% of the annual recharge, that is considered as safe. So, can we still be on the safer side and provide water for energy production and also domestic and for industries and irrigation, because the same aquifer will be used for all this. The second is, now how we have estimated uncommitted water is that you supply water, a fraction is consumed and rest is returned to the system. In that sense, if you have to use that water, first of all, that water needs to be treated. That is all about the managerial point that Deepak highlighted. So the water needs to be treated. The second is, even if the quality of water is good, we need to ensure that there are sufficient reservoirs, which can tap this water, because in India, apart from, of course, the eastern coast and the northeastern, most of the monsoon, we get only one monsoon, and that is 3 to 4 months which are underway now. Only the eastern coast and the northeast India, they get this northeast monsoon. So we need to ensure that even if we are, kind of saying that water is available, but a lot of this water might be also flowing down. A lot of this water might be flowing into the sea. A lot of this water might be lost. So we need to do assessment whether the storages can be made and then the water can be allocated for production of green hydrogen and other industrial process. With this, we are through with the presentation. So thank you so much for your patience listening, and I hope you are more informed about the RE space in India and green hydrogen space in particular. What we have done is that we have tried to simulate the whole study in the form of a game. We are gonna share. Yeah, this is the QR code of the game. I mean, thanks to our colleague from the outreach, they have done a wonderful work of getting this game in place. You can scan the QR code, you put your options, how much renewable energy you would like to deploy, what kind of a projects you want to develop, and you will get, whether it's possible, whether it's feasible, whether you will have constraints or not. So I hope you will find this exercise very interesting. So with this, thank you once again, and I hand it back to Anushka. Yeah, please.
Thank you so much, Nitin and Deepak, for your presentation. The nexus insights of the social, technical, and the economical aspects for scaling up green hydrogen and RE were clearly explained. Now, I would like to call Hemant Mallya, a fellow at CEEW, to be the moderator for upcoming panel discussion. I would like to call upon all the panelists one by one in order of alphabetic order. So firstly, we have Anna Biswas. Anna works as the Managing Director at the Forum for Future India. Anna leads Forum's work in India and South Asia region and is responsible for how Forum's initiative with business, government, and civil society within the transition in energy, food, and the purpose of business are designed and run to create impact. She has over 20 years of experience in sustainability and sustainable business. Next, we have Divya Sharma. Divya is working as the Deputy Head of Corporations with the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation in India. SDC's work in India focuses on climate change environment, disaster risk management, supporting innovative actions and capacity building in mountain and urban landscapes. Divya has more than 25 years of experience in development cooperation experience, working in field of climate change adaptation, natural resource and environment management. She holds a master's in climate change and environmental management from University of Oxford and master's in regional and regional planning and rural development from School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. Next, we have Maniswini Raj. Maniswini is a partner with the CRISIL Amarchand Mangaldas in the energy and infrastructure practice area. She has over 14 years of experience in advising private equity funds, large corporates, lenders, amongst others, with a specialization in project finance and structured finance projects, development, M&A, and infrastructure, energy, and transition sectors. Next, we have Pranab R. Chaudhary. Pranab leads Landstack, a global south think tank that seeks to enrich and expand the land governance ecosystem through evidence and capacity building, as well as transdisciplinary partnerships. He spearheads India Land and Development Conference, an annual convening of intense and diverse land conversation. As a scientist with the National Agriculture Research System and later as a development sector actor, Pranab has worked in interdisciplinary issues around natural resource management and governance for 3 decades. So over to you, Hemant, for the panel discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you all the panelists for joining us. 3 of them have actually traveled from outside of Delhi, so really appreciate you taking the time. And perhaps one of the few, probably the only panel where women outnumber men. So I think we can applaud ourselves there. Industry panel, I mean. So let's get started. If you look at the top line number, very exciting, right? 24,000 gigawatts is not a small number. It's given me palpitations for many months now, because once the number goes out, I think there'll be a lot of excitement. But it's not all hunky-dory. Pranab, I'll start with you, not because you're a male, but because land is going to be the biggest challenge. In one of our assessments, now of course there are many trade-offs with different constraints, but in one of the cases that we ran, and it's in our publication, the amount of land requirement is exceeding 4% of India's land mass. Might seem like a very small number, but it's humongous. Industry has always faced challenges with land acquisition for really smaller parcels to just locate their factories. Here we are talking about enormous scale of land acquisition, and that definitely is going to be a challenge. So how do you, perceive, the potential versus the challenge of land acquisition, and how do we navigate, that challenge?
Thanks, Hemant. I had also the opportunity to review this report, and also during the process of development, I was a little bit involved in that. So a fairly good idea, the amount of effort that gone into it. So I really appreciate and the whole presentation. And thanks for giving the only man in the panel the first opportunity. Yeah, really feeling very safe among all the women here. See, I think the 2 aspects I would like to respond. One is the reality of land, the context and the problem, and second, is there a solution? If there, how can we address it? If you look at the context, I think Dhruv was telling that finite land, infinite RE aspirations, I would say. So yeah, we are looking at big numbers, million, 7,000, and all these big numbers. When you look at land, we always look at wasteland. We see that land is available, the wastelands are there. So is any land waste? I don't think so, and I think none of us would have that confusion. Each land either being used by human being or nature for some purposes. So there are some existing land, even most of the land we call wasteland are common land, the whole common property resources where people are dependent on that. So I think that is something we need to look at. So, and then when you look at land, we always look at competitive use, economic use, but I think as being discussed, we have now ecological use, new uses being coming. So now a land lying fallow was earlier looked as unproductive and bad. Now fallow lands, people in Scotland are lying fallow and keeping the land fallow and earning carbon credit. So now there is also economic use, new value of land is coming in. So I think, and now with climate action, not only renewable energy, there is an estimate that we require 1 billion hectares of land for natural climate solutions, where the land is going to come from. And if you look at land, another reality is that is multiple use, multiple user. And land has a multiple dimension. So land it is not only purely economic, ecological, or social, or political, it is also cultural. For many people, for many of us, land is identity. Many people in South India, their village name is attached to their name. So this is something which is beyond negotiable. So I think that must be kept in mind. Another important thing, before I come to the solution, we use the word availability everywhere. So, and the availability is coming in the context of biophysical availability. Like you look at the constraint, you look at the limitation, 35,000 feet above, you did the geospatial analysis, excellent thing. But what ends is that where you go to access the land, that is on the ground, that is access. So between availability and access, a lot of other layers coming in, which while coming to solution, I'll suggest. So beyond biophysical dimension, we need to look at legal administration. In India, land is on legal pluralism. So land, it is a state subject, but center, they decide a lot of things. When you go to customary tenure areas, you have a lot of customary regimes. And despite everything we know, land is, there is embedded informality. Most of the places, there is a formality doesn't work. So now, how you address it? So while reviewing, I had suggested a kind of framework, so which is something like looking at social, ecological, and economic aspect. So it is about redistribution, it is about sustainability or resilience. So if you look at estimates, so now looking at 4%. So can you revisit? So the whole 4% is based on, like in solar, we are assumption is that we need for each megawatt 4 to 8 acres of land. So as you know that this whole technology is changing fast. So and we are looking at 2070. So maybe at that time you may be requiring less than 1 acre of land. So I think we need to also have those scenarios of calculation revisiting that. So what is going beyond? Second thing is that if you look at and here we are look at mostly large-scale solars and large-scale wind, big projects. So and the reality at Melbourne is the whole overlapping kind of thing. So can you also re-estimate the land and look at instead of 4%, can you do you require less land? So now coming to this is regarding the demand. Coming to supply side. So if you look at supply side, there is this coming to the legal and admin and socio-cultural aspect. So there is some land which are really not wasteland but wasted land. ACs there, 50% land is not being used. IMs are given to 200 hectares of land, but they are using hardly 50 to 100 acres of land. There was an estimate by SAIL chairman Rungta committee, which found that along with public sector, along with the public sector industries, it was in early 2010, about 1 lakh hectares of land being given to them for the last 50 years not being utilized. So now a lot of land, even urban areas we find are not utilized. So can this land be assessed, and we see that railway, defense, the list goes on. Can we look at those land? Because those land you cannot look at from the biophysical front, you have to look at the legal perspective. Second is that, can you do a kind of risk zoning and valuation? Like if you look at land, we have, here we're not at schedule area. So we are looking at where there is more solar radiation, where there is less water, more rainfall, or biophysical. What about schedule 5 areas, schedule 6 areas, where even if everything is there, you cannot access land because there are legal barriers. So we need to look at, I think, those legal cultural dimensions added there. And last but not the least, when you look at how you take for action, I'll end with that. So how you value land. So here I think Nitin was talking about circle rate. So now globally, now we are a lot of estimates coming in around the public land valuation, where we are going beyond economics to add socio-cultural, emotional, ecological values. So the multi-dimensional, so RICS, GLTN, visibility. So we have a lot of framework coming in. We are trying to see that how can you value land And then if you land value comes up, so can you internalize that cost into RE? So then I think many developers, RE developers will be rethinking. So whether we need so much of land because land value is so high. So maybe they will be happy to think about some other model. And another interesting thing is that can you look at this leasing option? So instead of buying land, so for example, if you look at UP Land Act, Land Leasing Act, UP talk about 30 years of lease for solar farms. So can you look at leasing where there is a win-win scenario? The people there on whose land we are putting up solar, they are also getting some access. So then the resistance and conflict might come up. And last but not the least, I think, taking the work you are trying to do, can you have some responsible investment framework around RE? Which is, I think, still being discussed. Good that no one is talking about Niti Aayog. So, and already globally, when this land grab started in 2008, when agricultural investment went to Africa, with the capital, because of the subprime crisis went there, we found that a lot of land was taken, and this whole, to address global land grab, a lot of responsible framework came in. USAID came in framework, VGD came in framework. So can you also think about a framework where also we include social impact assessment and other things? Yeah, I'll stop here.
Yeah, thanks, Pranab. And I'll come back to you on the legality of land and your land-related framework as well. Talking to Pranab is good because he gives me a good reality check on every number I put out there. As if land weren't a problem, we are taking it upon ourselves to also chase green hydrogen, something that we need but will potentially cause problems on the waterfront. We clearly say that water availability is not a problem, but Divya, that's not the same as management. So my question to you is, the fact of the matter is that we will need water, but there are competing uses that we cannot get away with. So how do we manage the challenge of water, as a nexus when it comes to energy?
Yeah, thank you so much, Hemant. And first of all, let me just congratulate CEEW on this very interesting study. At SDC, I'll be very honest, we've not been looking at green hydrogen per se, but we have been looking at RE space. We have been looking at water, energy, food, climate, interactions. I don't like the word nexus because for me, it has an inbuilt, negative connotations, whereas I'm a perpetual, shall I say, optimist who firmly believes in human ingenuity to find solutions to, issues which arise over time. And so we have been looking at this specifically in the solar space, in solar irrigation space. And today when I, see this presentation, and thanks to your invite, actually dug deeper into the green hydrogen space a little bit, to at least not sound completely ignorant of this issue. What struck me was, the statement made that there is no lack or, there is availability of water. Now, let's juxtapose this statement against certain realities of what we face in this country. 35 million people in this country today do not have access to safe water. 54% of India's total area is completely, absolutely water stressed. We are the largest user or evacuator of groundwater today. Now, in such a scenario, in this reality, when you place this other statement, one wonders, where is this really coming from? So, and where is it that we put our, shall I say, how do we prioritize in terms of how we are going to actually now use the resource that's there available with us, which is going to be the priority. I'm very happy that, that we are actually talking about this interaction between different resources and not just looking at it from the perspective of energy, which is unfortunately how most, energy-based, shall I say, dialogues or communications happen. So it's great. That's a fabulous first step already that we have brought all these other aspects which have direct interactions with whether it's green hydrogen, whether it's renewable energy on the table. So great first step. I'm sure, there are going to be policy people. I'm very glad that you are in discussions with Niti Aayog, and this whole, the human angle, the people's angle is being talked about in the RE space. Climate change, we know, is going to further stress this available water resource that we are talking about. Nitin already mentioned, population will increase, industrialization will grow, and the demand for the resource will increase. So hence, there is not saying that don't do this or don't do that. The question is, can we use the resource better? And that's where the water management piece comes in. Nitin touched upon it briefly in his statement, in his presentation towards the end of it. And I think a lot of those ideas need to be imbibed and fleshed out. What is the reality of what can be really done on ground in terms of solutions which are available. Nitin talked about, should we store, collect the water and store? We have to check, is it feasible? Should we inject the water into aquifer and use these aquifers as storage spaces? We have to see. Is there a potential to work with wastewater, urban wastewater, treat it and, use it? Is desalination an option? Unfortunately, the presentation also highlighted the areas as the highest potential in terms of solar deployment or hybrid deployment are also the most water scarce regions. So are we looking at desalination options, closer to the sea, desalinate the water, use it, get the clean water, and then provide it to the community for drinking water? What we have to watch out against is that basic needs must be met first. And how are we going to, because when RE deployment, when solar deployment actually started, it was mentioned that this does not require water. Just put up panels and we have, solar energy and there's no water. And then suddenly you say, oh, every day you need to wash them. Every day you need to clean them. Nobody thought about these things, because all these places have high amounts of sand and, dust in the air. So nobody thought about all this. And then we have actually come across cases where local communities have resented these solar plants, specifically at times of seasonal shortages. When there is absolute shortage of drinking water, then suddenly when community sees water being drawn out and panels being washed, they start resenting that, why is this being happened? So, and as I said, industry itself can actually, once they are aware of it, can actually take measures for it upfront. How do we harvest the water? How do we recharge it? How do we ensure that waste doesn't happen? Solutions are out there. The question is, how do we make sure that once we are deploying these RE solutions, to how these solutions can be embedded in the design upfront? I think that's the way to go forward. It does have dollar implications, no doubt, but you have to weigh the cost against the benefits and sustainability. The same businesses in the longer term financial, economic sustainability will have to consider these longer term benefits. And that's where I think the water management piece becomes very critical. It has, from the policy perspective, I think it's a combination of regulation plus incentives, but I firmly believe it's doable. And as I really congratulate you because you've brought this on the table. It's no longer an energy question. It's a question which looks at different aspects of the policies and sectors. And I think that trajectory is very important. So,
yeah, thanks, Divya. I think resentment is the word I was looking for, and hence the use of the word nexus, because what is today's social problem, tomorrow is going to be a political problem, and subsequently an economic problem, and the casualty is going to be the scale of development that we are looking at, right? So today we are only at 125 to 150 gigawatts, I think less than 150 gigawatts of solar plus wind. Manaswini, your clients are looking at a gigantic problem ahead if Divya and Pranab are to be believed with. So have you seen, legal challenges already manifesting, and if so, what is the nature of those challenges? And, does the ecosystem in general, especially the developers, foresee this as being a challenge in the future? Because I think we are being all starry-eyed with the 500 gigawatt target, and of course, we are the ones who are saying 7,000 gigawatts. So clearly a huge business potential, but is anyone even thinking about all the challenges, that we'll have to, overcome before we hit even 500 gigawatts?
Sure. So I do as a law firm person who works at a law firm, I represent developers, I represent lenders, I represent contractors and investors. So I do see a slightly different side, so I will offer that perspective. Of course, there are legal challenges, and there is a social cost to whatever, like even Dhruba mentioned, there is a social cost to renewable energy development. But I don't think that either policy or a developer is blind to those. There are methodologies that have been put in place, and I can give you a couple of illustrations. I'll deal with land first. So, of course, land in India is highly coveted and therefore highly contested. Exactly like he said, it's a person's identity most times. So now when the Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition, Rehabilitation and Resettlement Act came in 2013, it was introduced to regulate land use, increase compensation, and safeguard the rights of landowners. But it had certain clauses of majority consent, environmental impact assessment, social impact assessment, and these were looked at as hurdles to development. And since land acquisition is a concurrent list subject, states decided that they have the ability to sort of regulate around it. And they were also seeking to balance interests. Generation of electricity is also an essential utility. So there is a balance that was being sought to be done over there. Now, for a renewable energy developer, land is arguably the most critical requirement. Like he mentioned, 1 megawatt requires 5 to 7 acres of land. It is also typically the most cumbersome long lead item for this project developer. The first question that lenders ask is land tied up? The first question that investors ask is land tied up? And the challenges vary based on the nature of the land, whether it's agricultural or non-agricultural, in the way in which land records are kept, which was also mentioned, the devolution of title in case of land private owners. Now, of course, many states have issued renewable energy policies, and there they have the ability to give land on lease, which was another point that was mentioned. So whenever there is a government land lease, that makes things a lot simpler. But that's not always the place where the highest solar irradiation is, right? So there is usually a component of private land in almost all projects that we have seen. So that is where the issue is. Now, the fact that landowners are or small landowners are going to potentially lose their livelihood, even that is not a subject that has been entirely ignored. There are many, like I mentioned, there are some structures in place, and one illustration is that in many power purchase agreements that developers sign with a state discom or a state utility, but usually in the state ones, there is a provision that there has to be a certain percentage of locals who have to be employed by that project. So that is seeking to create employment. Now, the other point that is required for renewable energy projects is right of way. Obviously, you need transmission lines, and you need right of way for those overhead transmission lines. I hope I'm not being too technical here. This is fairly common. Now, recently, the Ministry of Power has also issued guidelines in June this year with respect to the manner in which compensation has to be given in relation to these transmission lines. And this is in addition to crop compensation and tree damage, should that happen, which are also regulatorily governed. Now, over here, there is a whole process that has been set forth. There is a standard operating procedure that has been set forth by the government. And it is government instrumentalities who are actually going to determine what is the compensation. It is the district collector, deputy commissioner, district magistrate. And again, compensation has been fixed as 30% of the land value at this point in time. So this is another way in which the government is seeking to protect and safeguard the cost, the social cost, so to say. The third impact that I would like to talk about is the ecological impact, which has also been brought up. On water, I do have to mention that earlier when so I've been doing renewable energy projects since like the NVVN times or Jawaharlal Nehru Solar Mission times of 2009. So yes, water was initially not supposed to be a risk issue or an impact point to discuss. Then suddenly everyone needed to have water, and we needed to see if there is clear tie-up of water for the project to be bankable or investable by a lender or an investor. But we have also come over, like it's evolved. The industry has also evolved. Innovation has also happened. Today, we see solar projects where there is no requirement of any water for cleaning because they're using robotic solar cleaners. And 9 out of 10 solar projects today use robotic solar cleaners. Not a drop of water is needed, particularly in the states where there are the drought-impacted states. So there is some innovation also that the industry is doing. I am also an optimist, so I like to present that side. Another point is ecologically, you also have to think about biodiversity, right? I mean, 90% of, okay, I'm not using any percentages, this is a statistics-based place, but loosely, most of the solar and wind projects are in Rajasthan and Gujarat. That's a well-known fact. Those are also the places where the great Indian bustard resides. And the great Indian bustard, as like a species, has been a cause of great concern to the investment community. The minute there is a project in Rajasthan, the first question is it part of the potential area or the priority area, which is where all the breeding happens of these great Indian bustard. In 2021, the Supreme Court issued a judgment that said that all transmission lines in this area have to be undergrounded. Now, that almost brought the renewable energy industry to a standstill for a period of time. And then there was no clarity on that for a long period of time. Now, in this year, early this year, the Supreme Court came out with a judgment where they themselves have recognized that they need to balance interests. They need to balance the biodiversity interest with the requirement of renewable energy and the country's requirements to meet NDCs, because you cannot ignore the fact that you do need to bring renewable energy on the grid. It's just not possible to go through life with coal and being the third largest emitter in the world. So these are a couple of things that I would like to present to you and to the panel perhaps, as what I see as mitigants, which and solutions that are being offered to the issues that you talk about.
Thanks, Manaswini. And balance is the right word, but clearly also a disconnect. So one of the things that we have found is roughly to 60 to 65% of all RE and potential wind and solar are in districts where there are existing conflicts, right? So clearly there is the disconnect where the developers feel that they are doing enough, and probably legally they are, but at the same time communities are not feeling to be a part of the change that we all desire. So Anna, since you have taken it upon yourself to solve all of the system level problems, how do we holistically look at this? Because we know that we have to transition, but I think many of us have seen this transition long enough to know that what is today's silver bullet is tomorrow's problem. We have seen it initially with gas, and what worries me is that RE might become the next natural gas, where society and politics dictate how we transition. So how do we holistically look at that trade-off and make this transition possible?
Thank you. I'd like to say it's not just me. It's not totally single-handedly. When we work together with a multitude of different collaborators, including CEEW and WRI India, TERI, a number of others, to set up the Responsible Energy Initiative about 5 years ago, loads of people sort of said to us, listen, you're confusing us. Why are you talking about so many different outcomes, so many different challenges? Can we not just take them one by one? And I think that's part of the problem, right, is that we are kind of trying to solve for individual problems when actually they are deeply interconnected and impact each other. So the Responsible Energy Initiative does look at multiple nexuses or interconnections with a positive lens. And the most obvious of which is the one that's about material security at the moment. So the government very clearly recognizes the problem with waste that's going to arise, is arising actually as solar panels become older. And as we realize that we can't do anything with the massive wind turbine blades other than bury them at the moment. So that nexus between material security and being able to use land not for storing old solar panels and not for burying wind turbine blades, but instead for generating renewable energy is one of the kind of most obvious nexuses that people initially kind of said, yeah, that's fine. Let's deal with that one. Let's take that first. But the second one that's kind of popping up now is the food security and renewable energy and energy security nexus. So how do we use things like agri-PV to both grow our food under, but also generate our renewable energy, but at scale, not just the kind of small distributed renewable energy, which is important, but we're actually talking about utility scale if we're going to get to 7,000 gigawatts. So that's kind of the other nexus. But then I think there are more and more that just pop up in conversation. Like, if we're going to use robots for cleaning, we've got less livelihoods being provided in the maintenance stage, right? So, okay, how do we do both of those? Then likewise, actually, we know there's a nexus between labor practices and whether actually India's value chain for renewable energy can provide an alternative to some of the other sources of solar panels, for instance. So that's a nexus between economic development and renewable energy through the human rights and labor practices. So there is a vast array of interconnections all around renewable energy, and I think we do actually have to look at them all holistically in order to not just be playing a game of whack-a-mole where you hit one and another pops up. What that means in practice is that it has to be multi-stakeholder and properly multi-stakeholder, not just kind of, I'm going to deal with this one, you deal with that one, but actually working together across different types of actors. And now that means the legal profession, the finance profession, the developers, the insurers, the public sector, civil society, communities that are affected, everyone actually being in dialogue with each other. And we've got some pretty serious power dynamics issues to tackle from the legacy of the energy sector, and if we're going to be able to do that. So proper multi-sector, multi-stakeholder collaboration is needed if we're going to look at this holistically. The second one is being able to hold multiple aims. That's not a natural human tendency. I don't know about you, multitasking is not my husband's primary ability. It's neither is it mine, to be fair. But we do actually need to be thinking about this holistically and be worried about other people's outcomes as well as the ones that we have our own personal incentives to create. So the third and final one that I would say, I think, is probably that we actually need to consider multiple time horizons. Even if we do look at multiple outcomes through multiple stakeholders working together, we might be solving for now, but not actually for the future. So to your point, there is a lot of R&D happening on things like energy density, the amount of energy that you can get from 1 acre of land from a solar panel. That kind of thing really needs to be looked at because it's important very, very soon, as well as in the long term, for how much land we will actually need. Likewise, we know that the climate risks that have been flagged in this brilliant report, thank you, I should have actually acknowledged how brilliant this is, thank you to the CEEW team. Those climate risks are beginning to appear, but they're going to get worse. And it doesn't make sense to be achieving today's goal of 450 gigawatts only for those plants to be threatened by floods, by too much heat to be viable producers of the solar, by changing wind patterns. So we really do need to be looking at this from multiple time horizons, not just from achieving those short-term goals.
Great, and I'll come back to you, I would like to better understand, what kind of framework we can develop. But before that, Pranab, you mentioned, legality of land and, looking at in the reverse fashion where is land available and how much RE can we produce. And that's one of our recommendations. And it's a recommendation because we couldn't analyze it ourselves. And that's because data on land is extremely difficult to find. And talking to developers, I've understood that even for them to know who owns the land can be very challenging. So how do we deal with this issue of land tenure and data on land? Because I'm pretty sure it's not a problem that we have, but probably at a state level as well. Digitization of land perhaps is one way to go, but is that the only solution, or are there other things we should be doing to resolve just the understanding of land? Because that's the starting point.
Thank you, Hemant. I'm very happy that we are discussing land. Because hardly people talk about land, and always when land comes in, everybody is a very contested thing, only lawyers can handle that. But no, as we see, no, land is not about law. I think whole responsible framework talk about land is beyond law. Even legally you handle everything, still you find conflict. So I think it is more social, political, cultural than law and technology. See, just like war is a very, if you, in the words of Churchill, war is too important thing to be left to general. Land is too important thing left to the government. But in India, land is already left to the government. So who discusses land in India? Tell me. Who maintains land data in India? How many universities teach land in India? How many NGOs or organizations work on land in India? None. Thanks to at least now energy coming in, climate action coming in, we are discussing land. So what we require is like more engagement around land. And data is one such thing. If you look at India's land data ecosystem, I have compared it globally. I think India has one of the best land data ecosystem. If you look at globally, even land laws in India are one of the best land laws. If you look at across the continent, even women land rights in India is, I think, that way. But despite that, the challenge is here is that and India has invested huge amount on this digitization. If you look at now, almost 97% of India's land records are digitized. Almost 60% of the cadastral maps are digitized, geo-referenced, but not in public domain.
So just clarification, when you say digitized, even ownership has been digitized? Or
I'm coming to that. And now, when everything is digitized, and now we're talking about something called unique land parcel ID. Just like Aadhaar, Government of India has launched something called Alpin. So every parcel will have a 16-digit ID. And now even every apartment also you can geolocate it. But when you look at re-survey, we have only re-surveyed 5 to 6% of India's land area. So surveys were done to update land record, and in Bihar, now Bihar is starting re-survey in some areas. Bihar's last survey was 100 years back. So what we're digitizing is whatever there in the record. So just to give you an example, in the district of Rayagada in Odisha, we tried to look at one village land record. So in the village map, there were 300 parcels. When you look at, download all the VOLEC and try to look at number of parcels there, because some parcels have been subdivided through some inheritance, some sale purchase, but not updated in the cadastral map. So there are 500 parcels. When you went to the village and did a survey, there are 1,200 parcels. So now what has happened? We have digitized the land record, and it is like some people got garbage in, garbage out. So, but we have not updated the land record. So we have to now, I think government is trying to do that. So like now you look at Swamitwa scheme, they are trying to do it. But despite that, there's a big challenge. We talked about leasing tenancy. So private land tenancy is allowed in UP for solar, up to 30 years. In India, as per a study we made, 30% of India's farmers are agriculture tenants. But due to land reform, nobody record tenancy in the land record. So now you are going for suppose you want to implement LAR and going to acquire private land, whom you give compensation? Fair compensation to whom? To landowners or to tenants? I think somebody raised that point. So what we need probably is a lot of investment in updating land record, and here private sector has to come in. I think for LAR, you have a clause that you update the land record, and they give it only 2 months to update the land record. How can you update the land record in 2 months where the legacy issues involved? I think a lot of investment of private sector, we have to factor the land cost has to be internalized in energy investments. So that is something important. We are external. You are telling that land should be given cheap. So at every state is trying to give land cheap. Renewable energy policies. Take the land at the cheapest rate. But land is premium. So when give land at cheapest rate now, in Ukraine, World Bank has done a study and they are telling for public sector, for renewable energy, go for public auctioning of land. So this could be one way to look at. So we have to now, and there are now everybody looking at public land valuation. So maybe the land, so for that you need a lot of investment and information. So I think there are 2 things required to set the data right. One is update the land records, so which government is trying to invest, which is a long-term thing. And second is connect the existing data sets. Just to give you an example and make them interoperable, we looked at women land right in India. So there are a lot of data sets like National Family Health Survey, India Human Development Survey, agriculture census, socio-economic caste census, all of them report land rights, women land rights. And can you imagine, as per them, women land rate in India vary from 3% to 42%. So somebody to look at operational holding, somebody to look at head of the household, somebody, so the issue is that can this data be made interoperable, talk to each other? And now with digitization it is possible. So, but nobody is investing, because everybody thinks land is a dirty thing, so we'll not go there. Second thing, is anybody investing in making, generating primary land data? So now what is the impact on land data? So for example, you have a lot of data around health and education and nutrition, which is informing policy. Around land, we don't have such data, primary data around land. How this investment in land data is really impacting changes. So only we read in all the conflict you get in land conflict watch websites or media. So we don't have real rigorous research data sets which can bring in. No startups are being promoted around land data. So actually what is required is a lot of investment. Even renewable energy sector should be prepared to invest in land data and to inform that, to make the land data ecosystem better. So I think that is something. Otherwise, we just want land, but when land has to be taken, hire a lawyer or retired bureaucrats and give them some good fees and then try to address it. It is not going to work.
Thanks, Pranab. You're playing with my emotions because you said we have the best land, records and system, and then you went on to list out all the problems that, I don't know if I become more pessimistic now, but you're also providing solutions. And I think a similar issue will play out in terms of water, because water will be contested by the smallest landholders, which are the farmers. Again, social and political issue, which can really blow up in our faces as far as green hydrogen is concerned. Divya, your organization has done a study across Asia to try and understand, water in agriculture. So what are the learnings from there, that we can utilize as far as, issue related to energy is concerned?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hemant. And yes, at SDC we have, as I was mentioning, we have been looking at the topic of solar irrigation and essentially trying to address the second generation questions, which is to how groundwater responsive this development is, how inclusive, socially inclusive this development is, and then the question of overall financial viability in the longer run of deployment of the technology or adoption of the technology by farmers. We have been looking at it not just in India, but also in Nepal, Bangladesh, as well as in Pakistan, just to understand a bit of dimension and dynamics of this particular topic. The results, as far as the water is concerned, are mixed. So on one hand, we looked at, right down from medium to large scale farmers in Gujarat, where we, deployment of or adoption of solar technology didn't seem to lead to additional water abstraction per se. And that was generally because farmers were already cultivating very high water-intensive cropping systems, So options to now further move on, from rice wheat, you can go to cotton, and it's not going to affect too much in terms of the abstraction. Whereas we also looked at the same time, smallholder farmers in Nepal, which did have, shift towards from cereal crops to vegetables, where, water usage increased. Similarly, in Bangladesh, more farmers were with, access to, shall we say, operationally free energy, now shifted to more summer rice, so which has a huge impact, large water footprint. So the trends are mixed, and that's where contextualized, nuanced understandings are very important, not only spatially contextualized, but as also your report mentions, seasonally contextualized. These, now, as I said, now this transition, for instance, in Bangladesh, towards summer rice could be a worrying trend for sure, is a worrying trend, because it does mean that there is more pressure on the groundwater resources. But interestingly, in 2022, there was a widespread drought in Bangladesh, in large parts of Bangladesh. And what we observed in the districts that we were working in or analyzing, The only patches of green that one could find during that period were the ones where solar irrigation was being practiced, because the cost of energy for the farmer was cheaper. That was also the time when the Ukraine-Russia issue emerged, so the cost of diesel went up. And at that point of time, this particular trend was partially responsible for actually the food security of people and farmers' income. Now, herein comes the conundrum, what is it we are talking about at times? And that's why increasingly, based on our learnings, what we are now looking at doing is not just look at energy, but again, look at this solar suitability or RE suitability and marry it with water, energy, food, livelihood, and climate perspectives. So bring it all under a common framework as much as possible. Of course, data sets are not a similar quality or granularity everywhere, but we try to do that on one hand. Second, and I picked this from what Anna was also saying, is the multi-stakeholder engagement. And that's what we are trying to do. Like, for instance, in Bangladesh, where the project is operational, we started with the infrastructure development company as a primary partner. Towards year 2, we had on board their representatives from Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Water Resources, their electricity department, So this was a truly multi-stakeholder conversation, including entrepreneurs on ground who were running the irrigation as a service model. So, and that's the sort of approach I think we need to adopt. We already mentioned, don't look at it from the energy perspective. Please bring all the others on board, have such a framework, have dialogue to understand where, which is the primary driving factor. In the next phase of this initiative, we want to move from South Asia also to look at parts of Africa. The challenges and the solutions are not perhaps exactly the same, but there is something to learn from both sides of the ocean, to see what works in which context. And that's where we will, as a consensus, one has to decide which is my primary objective. If food security is the primary objective and driving factor, then that is going to be the one which will decide, where is it as a country or as a region we are going to put our focus on. And that's the biggest learning we have found from our initiative, in South Asia when we look at solar. And I think green hydrogen or hydrogen sector can also, should, start with this initiative of not just look at it from energy perspective, but bring all the other stakeholders on board so that we can avoid mistakes right from the beginning and ensure we are on the right trajectory right from the outset.
Thanks, Divya. We are almost upon time, but I'll take the liberty of extending our discussion by just 5 minutes. Anna, with every single question, the system just keeps getting bigger. And I'm thinking, if there's no water, are we going to make hydrogen for industry, or are we going to eat food? And that's a different dimension I didn't even think about. Another dimension, Manaswini, for you is maybe, developers have a lower cost investment in terms of, developing or understanding land better or water resources better than trying to address the problem at a later stage when the development has completed. Maybe the investment trade-off is better off upfront than, at a later point. But really quickly, Anna, I'll come first to you and then Manaswini to you to close. From your perspective, what should the framework for addressing, the nexus, look like?
Right, okay, so too long didn't listen version. We definitely need one, and it's a bit complicated, but it's ultimately possible. I think what it needs to look like is a very conscious deliberation over what the trade-offs are, and over what the kind of multi-solving opportunities are. So what can we do that actually solves multiple different challenges that we're facing across these nexuses? I don't think ultimately we're going to have the choice between hydrogen for industry or food for people, right? Ultimately, we need both. So how do you make that happen in a way that minimizes the compromise you're making on both of them? And how do you make it happen in a way that actually creates other opportunities beyond that? So I think there's a sort of, what it needs to look like first is that very deliberate deliberation for both of those aspects.
Thank you. And Manaswini, the developer's perspective, I guess, I mean, you're not a developer, but I guess you provide a good perspective, what should, happen in terms of policy to make it easier? Because clearly we want the developers to succeed, but at the same time recognize that it's not going to be easy going forward. So what changes are required or what new policy regulations are required to enable that to happen smoothly?
So I think policy is on the right track. There's a lot of policy work that is happening in renewable energy, in green hydrogen, but I also note that after hearing all this conversation and getting all these perspectives, that maybe the developers are not entirely conscious or cognizant of the social impact of everything. So I guess I don't have a ready answer on what should be done in terms of policy, but the aim should be that the sum of everything should be net zero. That's how I would look at it.
Great, thank you very much. And for more perspective and highlights on what we have done, and hopefully to get the conversation started, we certainly don't claim to have the final answer here, but the report is available on our website, and we are formally launching it today. So maybe if all of us can just stand and get a picture click, that's
I would also invite Deepak Yadav and Nitin Basi for the picture. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe come to the front. All the panelists for, again, taking the time. Yeah, apparently there's a group photograph for the panelists, so let's do that, go through the motion. Yeah, I think in front, back.
I would also ask Hemant to give token of appreciation to the panelists. I would like to invite Nitin Basi for closing remarks for today's event.
Thanks, Anushka. And now, of course, we are at the fag end of the report launch. I'm sure the discussions, the deliberations, and some of the burning thoughts that might have risen after looking at the report, the findings, and what we heard from the panelists. It will give a lot of food for thought for us to take back and deliberate the issue further, specifically the nexus aspect further. And I agree, with Divya that maybe we are using the word nexus for too long, and it's a time when we start looking at the coherence part of it, that how we make it coherent, or how we make such initiatives coherent. On behalf of Council on Energy, Environment and Water, I take this opportunity to first of all thanks our esteemed panelists. They really shared insights, whether it's Divya, Anna, Pranab and Manaswini, to provide us with perspectives from different fields, from different experiences, and from different learnings. So we are so much thankful to you so that you could accept our invite and be present here and share your wisdom with us. The next, I would like to thank the participants. Of course, without them, we would not been able to drive the whole program. And I know that we have not provided a lot of chance for the discussions, but as my colleague Anushka mentioned, please feel free to write to us, reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to have discussions with you, to even, have deliberation around some of the, burning thoughts or some of the queries that you might have. So please feel free to reach out to us. The next is that any particular project or study needs resources. We have been talking about the resources, but this is specifically about the financial resources. And here we would like to thank our funder for this particular project, Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation. They have been really kind enough for us to take this route and do this deep diving. And of course, it took us a lot of time, but I think the fruits that we see now were perfect waiting for that time. So thank you, a big thanks to them. Like the issue, you have several layers, and let me also share with you, this is the first time any such study has been undertaken where at least you have 10 different, factors, indicators, which have been considered when we were looking at the potential of RE deployment and also the green hydrogen production in India. And this would not have been possible if we are not, in Nexus at CEEW. So, I would like to make a specific mention of the teams who have actually contributed to it. Of course, it was led by industrial sustainability team, which my colleague Hemant leads. Deepak was, of course, the pillar, behind this report. Not only contributing from the technical side of it, but also coordinating with the various teams. And of course, Anushka, who started her career with the industrial sustainability team, she's now in a different team, but still remains with us. And other colleagues, who have contributed from time to time. Climate risk team, they have also helped us in understanding the risk work that they are doing. It is led by my colleague Vishwas Chitale, so we are thankful to them. Then energy transition team, a lot of, the validation that we wanted to do on the RE space and the impact space. We again had a lot of deliberations with them, and, it is led by colleague Neeraj Kuldeep, so we are again thankful to them. And sustainable water team, we are, there are at least 2 to 3 colleagues who have worked on it. So thanks to them as well. Yeah, it's a long closing remarks, I know. But these are the, main things that we should be doing. Now coming to the whole operational aspect of it. Now, this report itself would not have been possible if the team at the outreach would not have, given these edits, design, and, the copy edits and page setting and getting this report to us on time so that we can launch it today. So Karthike, if he's still around, and Alina, who has been, at the forefront of driving our reports, a big thanks to them. Colleagues from the administration who has ensured that, this setting is there, we can come together and do this nice launch. A big thanks to them. And of course, the events team, that is again a very important component of CEEW, and whatever studies and, events that we organize, they would not have been possible without them. And the last but not the least is our media team, who will ensure that the deliberations and discussions that we are having here are disseminated in the right corners with the right stakeholders and reach out to masses, because that is where we could drive a lot of, our, engagements and make an impact. And finally, our IT colleagues, the presentation you see here, and, the gaming and the QR code, we totally depend on them to generate them. So a big thank to you. I see Ajit is here and he's smiling. With this, we formally close this report launch. Hope I have covered everyone. If I have missed out anyone, please forgive me. And you all are welcome to join us over a cup of tea and coffee. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nitin. Going forward, we have copy of the Nexus report kept outside. They are for viewing only, and you can have a look at them there, or you can scan the QR code. And the Nexus study is now also live at our website, so you can read the whole report online. Next, we also have refreshments on the in the room across from the registration desk. And finally, I would like to thank all the people who have made this event successful. Also, special thanks to Pujal Tiwari, who has made the visualizations for Nexus. And you can also scan the QR code if you were not able to do that earlier, and look at the game that we have created in scaling up RE. So that's something interesting that I think you will find. So thank you so much, everyone.